Okay, family, more breadcrumbs, or should I say, some want me to call it golden nuggets. Got much more to share with you. Some very more profound stuff that I've come across in these last many weeks. I mean, if you have any appreciation for the law of coincidence or the laws of probability, there isn't a computer big enough on this planet that can calculate the probabilities involved in what I'm going to show you here in a little bit. Now, what it means, I don't know. It means something huge, because if you do have an appreciation and even a limited understanding of probabilities and coincidence and all that stuff, this won't speak at you. Rather, it will shout at you with a megaphone and 1,000-watt amplifiers. This is huge. It's huge. And we'll be looking at two applications of the Fibonacci golden ratio countdown curve. One which I think God was telling us to look at when he gave Olive Branch a screensaver here a couple days ago. And I posted it on my community post, and she posted it on her community post. And here it was a nebula. And for about the first half hour, I know what this nebula is. I've seen it before. And then it clicked, and there it was. It was the Crab Nebula. Well, we applied that Fibonacci curve on 1111. The Crab Nebula is right above the right hand of Orion. And on November 11th, the moon almost conjoined with the Crab Nebula over Orion's right hand. And 1111, November 11th, that position in the heavens above Orion became, as it were, a counting point where we do our countdowns. And applying the Fibonacci curve on that day gave us a pattern that swooped down close to the bottom of Virgo on November 21st, when the moon just turned to crescent, was right next to Spica, Spica being the barley grain, and the curve continually going farther down below the ecliptic through the Owl constellation down to the G29 nebula that God gave many of us a couple weeks earlier, that being the G299 nebula. And that curve itself went through Polaris and then Arcturus. That was seen by many dreamers. So we'll look at that here in a little bit, and then we'll look at the other Fibonacci application that I'm talking about that is just off the charts, just totally off the charts. But before I get into that, this is my opportunity to address some issues that continually need to be addressed, because a lot of times we have a lot of latecomers coming to the dance, and they really don't understand what's going on. So I need to explain what this ministry is all about. And this started many years back, but in the last 12 months, a very serious and intense focus was on looking for rapture event dates, not setting dates, but looking at times and seasons and all that other stuff. And where the Lord directed it was a deeper emphasis, a bigger emphasis, aside looking for rapture events and end-time events, a deeper and more profound emphasis on restoring his dates and times. That includes his appointed times, his covenant dates, and his convocations. And now it's becoming clear that he's restoring the Mazzaroth, Job 38, 31, and 32. He's talking to Job about Orion, and the bringing forth of the Mazzaroth in its season. In other words, for many years, and especially at the time of Job, it wasn't the season yet. Now, I kind of threw the name Orion out about 3-4 times here, because I have people choking on, well, you're talking astrology. Oh, yeah, so was God when he was talking to Job. God is using stellarium to restore one of the biggest and most profound chronometers or cosmic Rolex watches that there is. And that is the Mazzaroth, the precession of the sun and the moon and the planets. That is a clock. It's a watch. It's a calendar. It's God's Rolex. And he's taking it back. And as one sister pointed out a couple times in the comment section, God spoke to her and said, the ballroom is in stellarium. What's a ballroom? It's where you go to dance. The dance is in stellarium. And what is stellarium? It is a very accurate, a very precise rendering of the movement of the sun, the moon, the stars as they progress and parade through the constellations. And sorry to say, the only pictorial objects in stellarium are those that were designed many years back by the people in astrology. That's what God has to work with. There are no renderings of the constellations where we see only Jesus and or the bride and or the two witnesses or Mary or Peter or Paul. That doesn't exist. God is using the standard that everybody can understand so he can talk to us. And what he's doing is he's taking these characters, these players, these mythological characters and mythological players like Orion, as well as Virgo, Sagittarius, Aquarius, the Gemini twins, in chorus with all these nebulas that are out there, in chorus with all these galaxies that are out there, and he's painting a timeline. He's taking back these characters and he's changing them into Jesus Christ. Aquarius, pouring out the waters on the moon. That is living waters used to mikvah the bride, which is the moon. The moon is Luna. Luna originates as a mother goddess. Not anymore. How about Jesus as the sun? In Malachi chapter 4, verses 1 and 2, it's the sun, S-U-N, son of righteousness, rising with healing in his wings. That is a male representative of the phoenix. And here Malachi, a prophet of God in the Old Testament, is using it to define the Messiah. Maybe we should burn him at the stake because he's into astrology. No, Malachi is looking forward to the restoration of the Mazzaroth. The Mazzaroth is the procession of all constellations, sun, moon, and stars, nebulas, galaxies, the whole 9 yards, the procession, the parade, the dance in the heavens. That is what Malachi was looking forward to, and he defined the Messiah as the Son, S-U-N, the Son of Righteousness with healing in his wings. That is a representation of the phoenix and or the fertility gods of Egypt, such as Horus or Ra. And that's coming from a prophet of God. Go figure. Yeah, go figure. If you can't see what God's doing here in restoring his Rolex, the heavens, and redefining all these constellations in the image and likeness of Yahshua Mashiach, of our Jesus, of our Christ, then these butterfly videos are not for you. So I'm trying to help some of you out here who are stumbling on this stuff, that you're seeing it incorrectly. God is restoring what was his to begin with, and he's using what he has to work with, and he's even using the mythological themes behind each and every one of these God characters, such as Aquarius, Orion, the sun, the mother fertility goddess Luna, which is the moon. He's changing it all into his characters and players. The moon is the bride. We find a phoenix at the base of the river snake, Eridanus, and that could represent Christ or it could represent the bride. And what is right off the beak? The string of pearls star cluster. Are you seeing the typology, the themology as I call it? So those of you that are new to the dance of the black and blue butterfly, that's what these butterfly videos are all about. The ballroom is in stellarium. The dance is in stellarium. Are you here to dance with the Lord? Well, you need to go back and look at all these videos, especially like the last half dozen, because it explains all these things and you can see the Lord pulling the typology out and transforming it into Messiah. He is expressing Messiah in the heavens. The story of Jesus is written in the heavens. And this dance is getting us from one stepping stone to the next as he's leading us toward the out-translation of the bride. Not the out-translation of the guests at the wedding, because the guests at the wedding are not going to be out-translated when the bride goes. The bride goes first. The bride always goes first. That's how it works in a Hebrew, Jerusalem-based betrothal protocol. The groom comes back for the bride They have a 7-day honeymoon. And after that period of time, after that honeymoon, then the father throws a banquet, a wedding banquet. And that's when the guests at the wedding are collected and brought into the wedding. There is a multiple out translation involved here. And like I said, if you were a newcomer to this dance, you need to get into this stuff and look it up. And I especially encourage you, and if I could say, require of you, to look into the 2-part series with the introduction called Passover, Pentecost, and the Seventh-day Weekly Sabbath Lost. Why? Because it proves and demonstrates the correct calendar that you need to find all these things. It's the one that God gave Moses, because the majority of watchmen on the walls and all these so-called prophets and teachers, for some reason, go running to the Hebrew religious community and says, well, since this is all Hebrew stuff, give us your Hebrew calendar. Obviously, you know what it is because you're Hebrew. And you don't realize that Jesus rebuked these people at every occasion he came in front of them, proving that they knew nothing and they got everything wrong. And they missed Pentecost because of it. That is Acts chapter 2, when Pentecost was fully come. This was many, many weeks after the Hebrew community in the time of Jesus celebrated their Pentecost. Pentecost is not 50 days after Passover or 50 days after the barley first fruit grain wave offering. It is much later. It is identical to when Moses came off the mountain with the Torah. And it took Moses 45 days to get to the mountain, then an additional 50 days getting the law, the last 40 of which Moses was alone on the mountain with God. That's 95 days. 95 days from leaving Egypt was Pentecost for Moses, not 50 days. 95 days. And this series of Passover, Pentecost, and the Seventh-day Weekly Sabbath Lost defines all that stuff. But people want to go running to the Hebrew religious community who base their calendar on Babylonian methodology. They use the spring equinox. That is a no-no. And those of you out there that are still using a solar calendar to determine God's dates, that is a no-no. Because your average person, that calendar that God gave Moses, the average person out there, the sheep herder, the fisherman, the farmer, they all relied on their own 2 eyes. They did not have access to astronomical or astrological charts to determine where the sun is. All they had was to look up in the heavens in a very select period of time to see if there was a new crescent moon. Because they planted by that moon, they harvested by that moon. They fished by that moon, they raised their vineyards on that moon. And besides, you cannot see any constellations when you're looking at the sun because the sun is burning your eyes out. And even if you had sunglasses, well, there's this thing called a blue sky and clouds that kind of get in the way, and you can't see where the sun is in any one constellation at any one time, and thereby you cannot calculate the time or season or the beginning or the ending of a month with a solar calendar. You have to go by the setting of the sun, followed by the moon set on the day you think there will be a first sighting of the crescent moon. And that's pretty obvious because you had 3 days of no moon. Prior to that day, you're going to be sitting out in front of your shack watching the moon set. And is it there? There it is. And there's your first day of God's month. It's simple. It works. It's the only thing that works. They did not have Stellarium or a computer or an Android or iPhone back then to tell them when the first day of the month was. They only had their own 2 eyes. But we want to complicate things and, oh, it's got to be during a solar calendar. Oh, it's got to be one of these secret squirrel calendars that only we know about. This is what this ministry is pushing because this is what God is pushing in this ministry. A very second photo finish close mission of this ministry is to try to dial in or find that season of the return of Christ for his bride. And I'm hounding on this. I'm banging on the walls trying to get people to listen, to do this first, because inevitably And continually, I'm getting people coming and making comments. Have you considered Hanukkah? Yes, I have. I've considered all these things. Hanukkah is until middle to end of next January. No, it's not, because I Googled it, and it comes up mid to late December. Yeah, based on the Hebrew community's perverted Babylonian-based calendar. Why would God use that? But what God is using is these stepping stones, is the revealing of the Mazzaroth. So do you want God's calendar, or do you want something that, might be? I tell you what, the Rolex is a very expensive piece of machinery because of its accuracy. God is accurate in his calendar, in his chronometer. And here you want people using the Enoch calendar, which is a 364-day solar calendar, which doesn't exist. It's broken. You're missing a day. I mean, here God's looking for a Rolex clock, and he's giving Moses and the children of Israel and us a broken chronometer, one that is dysfunctional. What part of this do we not understand? And I could really get deep into this, but I want to get through this warning speech I'm giving so I can get into the good stuff, which is the next stepping stones. In addition to all of what I just said, I feel on my heart, I believe it's from the Lord, that the separation is going to continue. This is not a separation like the goats and the sheep, those staying in heaven and those not. This is a separation between the bride and those who are not the bride. And even in the bride company, there are going to be those who will have a higher calling because they put the time, the effort, and the sacrifice on learning the things of the Lord. Brideship is primarily determined on your deep love relationship with the Lord, and that communication, and that deep friendship, and that deep union with the Lord. But he's looking for those that will rule and reign with him, and he's not going to use simple sheep to rule and reign over the nations. It's going to be those who have been tried and tested and schooled and formed into those people who can think, who can reason, and who can follow the instructions of the Lord. And here's one instruction that he wants you to know. Jeremiah 10, verses 1 and 2. Verse 2 says, "Thus saith the Lord." Hey, are you taking instruction? He's given it. "Learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at their signs of heaven." Let me really emphasize what he said here. Learn not the way of the heathen. Do you even know what that is? And let me tie into that real quick, Revelations 18:4. "And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her," that is Babylon, "come out of Babylon, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and you receive not her plagues." And again, I ask the question, do you even know what Babylon looks like? Because I promise you, the majority of you are practicing Babylonian traditions and Babylonian-based holiday doctrines, and you don't even know it. That's how deception works. It comes as something warm and fuzzy, usually something with bling bling and a lot of flash and all the good tidings that come with it. And we sit here and we say, "We love you, Jesus, we love you." And yet, well, we love you this far, but we're not going to follow your instruction about coming out of Babylon because that just might put friction between me and my family, and I want those warm and fuzzy memories. That is not what I call the bride has made herself ready. And back to Jeremiah 10, do not learn the ways of the heathen, of the pagans, of Babylon. And that's where the majority of our holiday traditions have come from. We've learned the ways, and we practice them, we endorse them, we promote them, and we enjoy them. And if you read the rest of that chapter of Jeremiah, has something to do with cutting down a tree and doing things with that tree. Now that could be forming it into an idol and parading it around, which most religious parades do. Or it could be that bright and shiny thing that you hang all kinds of silver and gold orbs on, which back then represented deities and the pagan angels. I don't remember any of that at the original nativity, but I can find it plastered all over history, from Egypt to Babylon to Northern Europe to pagan Rome. I've got a 5-part series called Revealing Antichrist. It's on my YouTube channel. You're welcome to it. And I realize that many people who watch it will be unsubscribing. Don't care. I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here to find the truth. And you're welcome to dance that dance that God has had me on and other people, but it's going to cost you something. You'll be black and blue by the time you're done. That 5-part series on revealing Antichrist will take you through a rather disturbing voyage, as it were, of history and show you where the majority of our Christian doctrines came from and how they've been perverted. I mean, it should shock you, but it's also going to knock you back on your heels because you will hopefully come to understand that we've been duped, we've been deceived, and it's all there. The evidence is there, and the scripture is there. Don't think we got this all figured out, because what our forefathers gave us came from someone before them, which came before them, and so forth, and you can trace it right back to pagan Rome. And the guy that started that, well, his name is Constantine. You know, they never did find his first wife. Oh, sorry. They never even looked for her. She just disappeared, all done. And then the guy boils his firstborn son along with his infant bride that Constantine married years earlier, where he boiled them both because when they came of age, they threatened his kingship. This is the guy who orchestrated and mitigated the Nicene Council, where you get all your doctrines from. I'm telling you, this dance of the butterfly, it requires a deep commitment and a deep sacrifice if we want more of the Lord. That's how it's designed. There is a separation coming in Team Jesus. There is a sort of division, as it were, just as Jesus said he would bring. Jesus said, don't think that I come to bring unity. I bring a sword of division. And he even demonstrated that numerous times, especially when he said, eat my flesh and drink my blood if you're going to have any part of me or the kingdom of God. The majority of his followers left him at that point. A sword of division. And he didn't run after them and try to explain to them what he meant by that. And I keep using this term, sacred cows. God is going to deal with each and every one of us, and he's been dealing with mine for many years, at many times, these sacred cows. He's going to turn it into sacred hamburger, because the pathway to deception is lined with sacred cows. And sacred cows die a hard death, especially if we have our arms and lips wrapped around them because we love them more than we love the Lord. The desires and the motives of our hearts are going to be exposed, and judgment and exposure begins at the house of God. I believe that's in Ezekiel, and that's a good couple chapters to read. Read Ezekiel chapter 8 and chapter 9. That's what this 5-part series on revealing Antichrist is based on. It's based on the deception that the children of Israel got themselves into and would not face up to, and it brought the destruction of Israel and the temple and 2 or 3 million Israelites. And one of the things mentioned in there is, they're weeping for Tammuz and putting the branch to the nose. Guess what most Christians have been doing all their lives in this upcoming season? That's what that is. Ever see the movie A Christ Mithras Carol by Charles Dickens? Oh, did I pronounce that wrong? Christ Mithras? Oh, that's in that 5-part series. Yeah, that's where the word came from. Mithras Christ. It doesn't come from Jesus Christ. It should read A Christ Yahshua Carol, but it says Christ Mass Carol. Mass is short for Mithras. Mithras Christ. Christ Mithras, the pagan god of Constantine. Come out of Babylon, my people. So if you endured the last few minutes of me on my soapbox, well, now we can go forward, and I'll show you what God has been bringing forth. Again, I'm not going to make any predictions as to what it means. Again, the disclaimer, I am not a prophet, or the Lord would be telling me what this means. And I'm not a dream interpreter, because that also is a prophetic gift. I'm relying on my life experience and the things I have learned as I have trudged and stumbled my way through trying to translate these alleged prophetic dreams that people have been having for many, many years. And if you've watched the entire series on the black and blue butterfly, you can see how this took on a life of its own, how it evolved, and you can see what God is doing. Because I'm quite confident God will show you what he has been showing me. But I'm not a dream interpreter. I am using what I have learned. I am using Stellarium. I am using Team Jesus. I'm trying to apply as much common sense as possible, and lo and behold, we're getting results. We are not predicting a date of a rapture. Rather, we are predicting dates for signs and wonders in the heavens that God is giving us. And we're doing it through the eye of stellarium, not through some prophetic anointing. And the obvious things, to my understanding, is God is walking us forward step by step by step. That's all he's giving us, and that's all I have to work with. You're welcome to chime in anything that you have, but make sure it's according to the calendar of Moses. And like I said, the Hebrew religious community is off by a month. The Christian community from the mainline denominational churches are off on everything. And now they are so off that they are instituting the new one world religion, Chrislam, which is a combination of Roman-based Christianity, or I should say Orthodox Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. It's an abomination. But guess who just signed it into reality? The Pope. Yeah, this guy's really dialed into Christ Jesus. Sure he is. I mean, after all, he's called the Vicar of Christ, which means the substitute for Christ on earth, which means Antichrist. Substitute means anti, another type. A type in place of, anti-type, Antichrist. His own titles declare of what that office is. It's the Nicolaitan element found in one of the 7 churches of Revelation that the Lord severely rebukes. It's Nicolaitism on steroids. Someone's going to tell you how to think. And it's not Jesus Christ because you gave your crown to a man and not to the man, Christ Jesus. Jesus said, call no man father, call no man rabbi, call no man master, because there's only one person who holds that office who will be your teacher, your rabbi, your master, and that's Messiah. Jesus said, me the Messiah, I will be your teacher. Do not call anybody by that title and call no man father by that religious title, because there is only one Father and he is in heaven. And guess what the word Pope means? Father of fathers. I mean, can you not disobey Jesus any more than that? Well, you can, but this is so incredibly disobedient. And they have the gall to call themselves the only true church of Christ. Yet they don't do anything Christ tells them to do. And just to be an equal opportunity offender, I will say this, that in Revelation 17, there is a harlot church, a mother of churches, and her daughters are harlots as well. What's a harlot? It's someone who belongs to the king who is playing around and fornicating with other lovers, fornicating with the world. And that's what these daughters and this mystery mother have been doing all their existence. Just saying, go read it for yourself, Revelation 17. And she at some point will be destroyed by the 10 kings, the 10 horns, and she will be burned and her flesh eaten by them. Wow, I wonder what that means. Well, it goes right back to Ezekiel 8 and 9, because that's what happened to the children of Israel under the judgment of God. So again, I'm getting off track here. I want to get now more focused on these 2 Fibonacci applications that have given us some incredible renderings, and you'll see what I mean. Now, the first one I talked about at the beginning of the video, and that was that screensaver that God gave a number of believers, I hope, but particularly to Olive Branch. She said she woke up, she saw this on her screen, it's a screensaver, and these things update every couple days or a week or so. And I went, well, that's a nebula. And I think I know which one that is. Let me get back to you. And I looked, and it took me about 10, 20 minutes, and I went, that's the Crab Nebula. And I know where the Crab Nebula is. That is at the right hand of Orion. And when we first found that and applied it, that was November 11th, 1111. And that's one of the main numbers that many people have been getting over the years, especially over the last few months, and even more especially over the last few weeks and days. It's a countdown portal, if I can call it that. And when we applied the Fibonacci golden ratio curve pattern to it, it came out at the base of Virgo when the moon was there on November 21st, right next to Spica, the barley grain of heaven, with that curve passing through Polaris, the throne of God, and through Arcturus, these 2 stars being seen in other people's dreams, thus fulfilling those dreams and pointing to a stepping stone. that being at the feet of Virgo. And I emailed Olive Branch and I said, I don't think the Lord just gave us this screensaver as, hey, have a little encouragement here. I think it was that. Plus he's going, we need to reapply this, because guess what shows up here at the end of the month? If we apply it and use the exact same curve, well, the moon, when it finds itself at that location, starts to go into its crescent phase. And we have had multiple prophetic dreams of this crescent moon being at or around the time of rapture events. And I even kind of hinted at it in the last video, like, well, this 12/12 day could just be another stepping stone, because I have a couple other Fibonacci applications that I suspect are going to bring us farther into the month of December. And there it is. And just like clockwork, I'm not even finished with this video, and people are sending me more Crab Nebula dreams. Well, not necessarily Crab Nebula. They're sending me Octopus dreams. But when you go and look up the Octopus Nebula, it is the Crab Nebula. And the themology, the theme, the types that are involved in the narrative of these dreams from these dreamers is that of end-time events that connect with other dreams that other people have been having. And they seem to point to the beginning of the tribulation. They seem to be talking about cataclysmic climate change, cataclysmic food shortages, and storms from heaven breaking loose. All with Jesus in control, but all events that will come upon this earth to test all nations. Here's one that Sara Starchild had back in, it looks like September of 2020. And she just recently posted it this last couple days. And somebody left a comment in her comment section saying they too saw a octopus doing nasty things and it put them on a roller coaster ride, but Jesus was in control. I will put that link to Sara Starchild's recent posting of that dream from a couple years back. That will be in the description box for this video. Go and watch it. Again, the Octopus Nebula is the Crab Nebula. The Crab Nebula is a screenshot that Olive Branch received just a couple days ago. I think God's trying to tell us something. And just a quick one here, and you can see this on the last video postings in the comment section. This gentleman also had a screensaver. Just popped up this morning, another nebula. This one happened to be the Necklace Nebula. I'm kind of guessing that necklace was made out of pearls, but I looked it up, and it's positioned on that arrow constellation, Satica. And if you remember, in one of these last butterfly videos, couple videos back, where we're dealing with 2 pine cones with 2 arrows, and then 3 pine cones with 3 arrows, well, there the Lord was pointing to 2 Fibonacci curves that was confirming these signs and wonders in the heaven. And in one of these curves, that arrow was pointing at the Fibonacci curly Q thing on the screen, and the arrow tip of that constellation was actually touching that curve. Well, that is where the Necklace Nebula is located. It's located on that arrow. I mean, this Necklace Nebula didn't end up somewhere in Nowheresville. It ended up on one of the major players that God has been revealing through these butterfly videos. One of the main players. It's an arrow pointing. It's God pointing again. At least that's my takeaway when I'm looking at this. And now for the piece de resistance. That's the main reason why this gentleman received that screensaver. Well, you're looking at it, but what do you see? Can anyone in class tell me what we're looking at? Raise your hand, I'll call on you, and you tell me what we're supposed to look at, because God's pointing to his pointer. He's using his arrow pointer to point to the Fibonacci pointer, and it's pointing to something. What is it pointing to? You in the corner, you got your hand raised. What are we looking at?
It's pointing to the Crab Nebula at the end of the curly Q pattern.
You got it. Nailed it. Good job. We're going to name the next nebula after you. Look at it, family. It's pointing to the Crab Nebula. Do you think we got a themology going here on the Crab Nebula? Kind of like an impossible confirmation after an impossible confirmation after another impossible confirmation. God did not drop a very specific screensaver so that we can remain entertained. It's there to point to what he's pointing to, the Crab Nebula. All these dreams are involved in the same dance. All these screensavers are involved in the same dance. And when I place that Fibonacci golden ratio fingerprint finger of God on that Crab Nebula, which we first discovered and applied on 11/11, well, the second application, when that screensaver was first seen by Olive Branch, which I believe was on 12/12, that gave us a December 19th. I think God's pointing at that date for some reason. And just for a piece of trivia, we have 3,500 cataloged nebulas, most of which are in stellarium. So for God to drop a screensaver on someone, on us, on Team Jesus, that has some significance, that lands on one of these major player constellations, you have about a 1 in 3,500 chance of that happening. Then you multiply that against every point in the heavens that a nebula or a galaxy can land on, and that shoots to, like, I don't know, infinity. In other words, all these screensavers, impossible, totally impossible. But God uses his Mazzaroth, his signs and wonders in the heavens, to point at what he wants us to look at. This was no coincidence that this gentleman got the screensaver. And it's no coincidence that he got it today. And it's no coincidence it's pointing to the Crab Nebula. I rest my case on that one. So go Team Jesus. Keep it coming. You see stuff like this, post it, send it to me, email it to me. Hopefully we're not going to have too much use for it for too much longer, especially if things start popping on the 19th of December, give or take a day or two, because that is where that last Fibonacci curve, the second one that we apply to the Crab Nebula, that's where it dumps out at, the 19th of December. You tell me what that means. I mean, there was a day when the children of Israel finally passed into the Promised Land. I'm still hoping the body of Christ passes into the Promised Land before the end of the year. But that's my hope, and I'm sure for many of you that's your hope as well. But again, thank you, Team Jesus. Keep it coming. So you do with it what you want to do with it. I'm just putting it out there. The law of coincidence and the law of probabilities tells me that the Crab Nebula showing up on someone's screensaver, someone who has been instrumental and at the forefront of this dance, of this Fibonacci butterfly dance, just coming up on her screen, what does that tell you? Tells me that this is at least a stepping stone, and we can look forward to that day. But I got an earlier day, and this is the Fibonacci application that will blow your mind. And it had to do, again, step by step, the last step being in the last video, where we see these two galaxies that form what looks like a Fibonacci curve, which in a couple of people's dreams saw it as a cluster of eggs. I called it scrambled eggs, scrambled golden eggs, because it's actually called the golden egg star cluster. And I thought, I have to run a Fibonacci curve pattern through that to see what else it connects with. And I am going to do it starting the eye of that Fibonacci golden ratio curve thingy at the other golden eye cluster, which is in the constellation Cancer, the Crab constellation. Why? Well, it's a good place to start, but also because Sara Starchild received a dream, and she saw in the dream the numbers 321, 123. And in the dream, she saw this green speck. And she thought, and thought correctly, because of her life experience and working with this stuff, she kind of recognized it as, well, this might be an exoplanet. We see them all over the face of stellarium. And I looked at how she presented it, and I went, yeah, that is how stellarium presents exoplanets. It'll be a green dot, and it's got kind of like a bullseye around it, or a small circle. It'll look like a green dot. And then I did a little bit of research on exoplanets before diving deep into this. Comes out that there are 5,284 known and cataloged exoplanets, the majority of which are plotted and can be observed on stellarium. So out of those 5,284 exoplanets, well, I dialed in K2-123. K-123. Guess where it popped up? The Crab constellation right next to the Golden Eye cluster. Right where we've been sitting these last couple days, where the moon almost conjoined back on 12/12. The probability of that cannot be calculated. 5,284 exoplanets dispersed over the entire heavens, and we get the only one, 1, 2, 3, that plots exactly on 12/12, exactly where the moon is, exactly what we've been looking at. Hello? I'm starting there. That's where I put the eye of the Fibonacci curve. And things just went ballistic from there. Let me throw up in front of you on the screen the 12/12, that is the December 12th location of the moon on that 1, 2, 3 over the Golden Eye cluster. This is what it produced. And all those red words, red lettering, pointing to what they need to point to with that yellow line. I've got so much red on there, I can barely see the constellations. And we'll come to see that whatever that line touches is a constellation or a nebula or a galaxy that people saw in their dreams. This is the parade of the prophetic dreams these people have been seeing. The first one it goes through, well, the K123, then it comes around, it goes right through the Golden Eye cluster that I've talked about in the last video or two. Go back and watch them. Then it goes through Canis Minor. Unfortunately, that little mutt dog is covered up by the date and time display, but that's Canis Minor. That is how we found the Raccoon River, which found for us the star Sirius, which is a major player in all of this. Seriously. That joke will never die. Then it comes up and it goes through Gemini. That's the next thing it can touch, and that's the next thing it does touch it. And Gemini is coming up in the dreams of these people as two friendly companions. That was seen by Magnolia Blossom. Saw it in two different dreams, two different renderings, one pointing to two fish, well that's Pisces, and another one pointing to something with a bear. Yeah, we're going to get up to that bear here in a second. Then it goes up to the lynx. Well, actually, it goes to that guy there, and that may have something to do with the men in red robes running along the ecliptic, looking down, trying to find the compass. That's Sara Starchild. So that actually applies. I don't know the name of that constellation, but I'm more focused on that lynx because I had a Team Jesus player send in her dream where she was dreaming and she heard a cat purring. And she woke up, no cat in her room. And that line just happens to go through the main star of the constellation Lynx. Then it goes up and it hits that bear. And it cuts directly through right over the top of the Owl Nebula, the Northern Owl Nebula. What significance did that have in the last many videos? I mean, that was like one of the main players. Then it comes down and it hits Canis Venatici. I think that's how it's pronounced. And those are the royal dogs that Magnolia Blossom saw in one of her visions that she emailed me. And right at their feet are two galaxies called the Mice Galaxies. Well, what does that have to do with anything? This is the dream that Olive Branch had, where she saw three mice on the back of a rat. They come flying through. The rat turns and bites one of the mice. So now you only have two mice on the back of the rat. Well, I just found out earlier today that there is kind of sorta a rat constellation, and it's Leo. So we have two mice on the back of Leo. Look at your screen. That's exactly how it's set up. You can't make this stuff up. She saw this. Three mice down to two on the back of a rat. We got the Mice Galaxies. Here's a picture of it on Leo. Leo's back. Leo being the rat constellation. That's the only constellation that even remotely can be dialed up as the rat constellation. So I'm running with that. I mean, I spent hours looking for a rat constellation, even going to the Chinese zodiac, and it produced nothing. This came up and went, oh, there it is. But there's more. Let's follow this Fibonacci curve down from that two Mice Galaxies, and now it hits Virgo. And Virgo is in many people's dreams, especially this one of these last ones with the red temple. and this woman contesting and protesting these men in red robes looking for the compass. Well, this woman contests, she says we have to get the seed planted before winter, or something to that effect. And I showed you in the last video that is the winter wheat. The winter wheat or barley for Passover, for Rosh Hashanah, is normally planted very late fall into the winter, and it has to be planted before winter sets in, which is December 21st. And now we got this Fibonacci curve line going right through that character, Virgo. And then I highlight where the moon is going to be on the celestial ecliptic, and that is going to be about December 17th, give or take some hours. So I got the 16th into the 17th. Depends if you're looking at it from Jerusalem time or International Dateline time, but that's where it's going to be. So that could be a stepping stone around the 17th. I would put it more on the 17th, okay? But let's keep going farther down, because when it goes down, then we get into those two galaxies that are flying by each other. And here you can render it as this heart shape. Isn't that cool? God's sending his heart. And this is the golden egg star cluster. And it forms a Fibonacci if you look at it from the Hubble telescope's view of it. And another view of it is that it has rainbow colors in it. And that comes out of 2 or 3 different prophetic dreams that I've covered in multiple videos, especially part 2 of the 5-part series on decoding 2 moons, blood moon tetrads, star alignments, all that stuff. I believe it's in part 2, a rainbow of light. Well, there's the picture. Does that look like a rainbow to you? Certainly looks like a Fibonacci rainbow to me. And that golden scrambled egg cluster is in Corvus. And that's what Sara Starchild saw when I asked her about, do you got anything on Elijah's cave with crows? And this is what the Lord gave her. Gave her Corvus the crow and Crater the cup. And the cup was also seen by this sister, which I hope is in Team Jesus. And I'll post it for you. You can read it. I saw a blue hand, the blue hand of God, and it formed a cup. And that cup sits right over the blue Southern Star Owl Nebula. There's where the blue comes in. And that nebula and the cup and the Fibonacci line goes right through Hydra. And in Hydra are 2 of those blue nebulas. And it swings down further, and I could not get an accurate screenshot of Stellarium, because when you increase the area of the screenshot, Stellarium begins to fisheye. It begins to warp, and then everything just goes crazy. This is the best rendering I can do, and this is the rendering God's using, because he's using Stellarium. So he's only going to let me use this much because it lines up what he's pointing at with the Fibonacci fingerprint finger of God, which he's looking at with the golden eye cluster of God, which he wants us to see, wants us to touch, wants us to feel, wants us to discern. So that's what I got to work with. But I understand from my working with this for so many years now that Fibonacci curve, after it dips below the picture there, it's most likely going to go through the Magellanic Galaxy cloud, which God gave me and other dancers in this dance as a screensaver a few weeks back. And it goes through Argo, the ship. And if you have not watched any of these past 5 or 6 videos, well, you're going to be kind of clueless. The ship is what many people are seeing in their prophetic dreams, the ship that's going to carry the bride to the throne of God. We will sail away with the Lord to the Father on his throne. So I have 18 to 19 players, characters, signs in the heavens that are all connected by this one Fibonacci golden curve. And if you have an appreciation for probability, well, probabilities don't add. They multiply when combining them. So that first K2, 1, 2, 3, and it's sometimes called 1, 2, 3B, which I discern to be 3, 2, 1, a reflection of the other. The K2, 1, 2, 3 is, I can't even calculate that. So I'm going to multiply that to the probability of finding a golden eye just below it and a Canis Minor raccoon star just to its right, and then come up and hit Gemini, and I'll multiply against the Lynx and Ursa Minor and the Owl Nebula, and multiply it against the Mice galaxies and Virgo and Corvus, and oh yeah, the golden egg cluster scrambled egg, antenna galaxies and then multiply that against Hydra and the Southern Owl Nebula, and there isn't a number big enough to represent that. You are definitely approaching infinity. Definitely getting close to the last number of phi. Phi is the base number for the Fibonacci curve. And those of you familiar with probability and mathematics, you know what I'm talking about. I'm exaggerating just a little bit when I say infinity, but you can about imagine how big that number is. It has long ago reached that would represent impossibility. This is impossible. So for those of you who don't have a degree in rocket science, or who God has ordained and anointed to raise family and simply be a light onto the world, in other words, those of you who cannot wrap your head around these numbers, and I barely can, let me put this in a perspective that might get you through that struggle in understanding just how serious and profound these probability numbers represent. And I've used this analogy before. It has to do with playing the lottery. And I think most of you who don't have that rocket science degree do understand the dynamics of playing the lottery, which is you have about the same chance of winning it if you never buy a ticket. So follow along with this. Let's pretend you have a magical phone booth that you can step into, kind of like that magical phone booth on Doctor Who. And this magical phone booth can take you anywhere at any time from now and future past. And you go and you bust your piggy bank and you grab all the change and all the loose bills and you drain your bank account. You jump into the magical telephone booth and you send yourself to every state and county and city lottery drawing on today's date across the entire globe. And then you decide to go back in time and you hit all the lottery drawings for the last 50 years. Again, all of them, from state, county, city, your church's raffle, you name it. You put money down on all of them from today, 50 years back. And you don't use the same number on any of them. Every one of them, you got a separate brand new number that you're laying down on the table with that dollar bill. What are your chances that when you wake up tomorrow, you won every one of them? Well, that chance would be pretty much close to the probabilities you're looking at right here with that Fibonacci curve going through all these 18 or 19 or 20 points of contact. Let me say that again. You have the same chance of winning all of those lotteries, especially your church's lottery, than you have for all these characters, all these players in the heaven, all these points of contact that you're looking at. There's about the same chance of all that happening. And yet, when we look through the eye of Stellarium and what God has been revealing as he is bringing forth his Mazzaroth, well, that's what we're seeing. So that may help some of you without that degree in advanced mathematics to wrap your brain around this just a little bit so you can understand how profound this is. Because I bet most of you understand that lottery thing. Hope that helps. This is God's speak. It's God's vocabulary. It's God's pointing at what he wants you to see. It's God saying, look at what I see. Look at what I'm pointing at. This is 1,000% validation of these prophetic dreams. There is no other way or any deeper way or any more solid way of proving them 1,000% accurate. The only way you can escape this is you go stick your head in the sand. And if you feel so inclined to do so, let me just say, these videos are not for you. Go bless somebody else with your presence, some other YouTube channel, or start your own and come up with something better. Family, on all these former Fibonacci applications that God has walked us through, we normally get 3 to maybe 5 points of contact. This is 18 to 19 points of contact. And there's no part on that Fibonacci curve that doesn't contact something of great significance from a dreamer's dream. And I see it as an escalation of breadcrumbs again. I mean, from 3 to 5 points of contact to 18 or 19, all the Fibonacci curves producing astronomical probability numbers. And when you get 18 to 19, like I said, I know what that means. I just don't know if that's going to transfer into some prophetic fulfillment. Sorry, I'm not a prophet. But once again, I am amazed because I keep thinking, okay, another disappointment. No way is God going to top the last application. I mean, that was profound and it produced a stepping stone, only a stepping stone, and a lot of disappointment. There's no way. There is no way he can top this. And he did so by a factor of about 5, 3 to 5 into 18 or 19, 5. There's a prophetic number for you. So, again, we're standing on some stepping stones, looking like we've gone from 12/12, December 12th that is, to December 16th or 17th, more probably into the 17th. And finally, if we apply that Crab Nebula application that started at 11/11, well, that comes down on the 19th of December. We better get that seed planted like that protesting lady was suggesting that we get done before winter sets in. Because I'm looking for the Song of Solomon, where it said, spring is here and winter is over. So I give all this to you as encouragement. And again, I heavily emphasize that all of this is meaningless unless you take it and use it to assist you in preparing yourself, preparing your wedding dress for the coming groom. Let it move you to an even deeper relationship with the Lord. And I will again attach one of the more intimate Song of Solomon dance music that the Lord has brought to my attention and that I've used in other videos. My 2 favorites are the Dance of the Blue Butterfly that Sara Starchild put together. I mean, that is so beautiful. I just break down every time I see it, and I'll listen to it for hours. And the other one that I deeply love, that I believe God gave me for the body of Christ, is Dance With Me. I believe it was by Chris Dupre. Is that how it's pronounced? Such a beautiful song. And performed by Heart Cry of David. And I'm hoping there are not too many more stepping stones. I know you were right there with me on that one. Come out of Babylon, my people, and get into Jesus, deep into Jesus. Be his bride and nothing less. Maranatha.
Behold, you have come over the hills, upon the mountains. To me you have run, my beloved. You've captured my heart. With you I will go. You are my love. You are my farewell.